Hi, Father Greg here. Thanks so much for joining me again for another edition of 15 Minutes. Thanks for taking the time each week to watch these short videos. I hope they're helping you in your faith journey, especially as we approach the great solemnity of Christmas. We, of course, find ourselves in the season of Advent, the season of hope-filled anticipation. So our Advent wreath reminds us of the journey that we are on, and this weekend we approach the rose-colored candle, or pink candle, that is the third Sunday of our Advent journey, often referred to as Gaudete Sunday, because we'll hear in our second reading from St. Paul to rejoice always. And so we know that anytime we're on a long journey, we can have that feeling like, are we there yet? And maybe this whole year has been one like that. Are we done with this yet? Are we at the goal line yet? And just as we see around us the great promise of vaccinations and better treatments, there's a great sense of hope billowing up in a lot of us. Well, that kind of mirrors what the third Sunday of Advent is supposed to be about. Hope, rejoice. Don't worry, we're going to get there. We're going to overcome this. We're going to reach our destination. So I think it's rather fitting that we have this rose-colored candle weekend, or Gaudete Sunday, to rejoice in that. This week in particular, that is this past week, has been like a great Marian celebration. On Tuesday we celebrated the Immaculate Conception of our Blessed Mother, and last week's video I dedicated to talking about the Immaculate Conception and the importance that it has for us as Catholic Christians, as well as for our Orthodox brothers and sisters. But the theme of Mary, which is really important during this Advent season, continues throughout this week, because on the day after Immaculate Conception, on December 9th, on Wednesday, we celebrated the feast of Saint Juan Diego. And Juan Diego is a really important figure and person in history because of the feast we celebrate on Saturday, December 12th, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And Juan Diego and Our Lady of Guadalupe are inextricably linked. Why? Well, who is Juan Diego? Juan Diego was an Aztec who converted to Catholicism in the mid-16th century. He was 57 years old and a widower, and he would very often go early in the morning to Mass. And it was on December 9th, 1531, as he was making his way to a chapel, to a small church for morning Mass. He was in the area of Mexico, right near present-day Mexico City, in a suburb on a mountain called Tepeyac. And as he was going and making his way through there, and it was a cold morning, he had a number of layers on, including an outer cloak. As he was making his way through this normal path to get to Mass, he heard a beautiful sound, which he would later describe as birds chirping, but in this beautiful kind of symphony. He was intrigued by it and went a little off the path, and eventually saw this miraculous and marvelous scene. He saw this beautiful Aztec princess. She had the sun radiating about her. In fact, this is the image that Juan Diego saw, which we now call the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So this depicts the way Our Lady appeared to Juan Diego. Juan Diego was immediately floored by this apparition, and then Our Lady spoke to him. And in the course of her speaking, she said, "Go to the local bishop and tell him to build a shrine here." Now, why is that place important? This mountain of Tepeyac once had an Aztec temple there. And so Mary says, I want a shrine in my honor, that I, as the mother, can gather all my children to offer compassion and healing. So, Juan Diego, obedient to Our Lady, sets out and goes to the local bishop, who was a Franciscan. Now, as you can likely imagine, the bishop eventually meets with Juan Diego and is understandably doubtful about what Juan Diego is saying. It sounds kind of crazy. It's too good to be true, and after all, who's Juan Diego? He's a poor man. And so the bishop starts to think, is this man looking for notoriety? Is he looking for money? Is he looking for fame or something? So the bishop very smartly says, well, okay, if this is indeed true, if Our Lady appears to you again, ask for a sign from her. Then I'll know that it is authentic. So Juan Diego goes off. When he gets back home, he learns that his elderly uncle with whom he lives has become desperately ill. There was a particular disease that was rather common in that area, which would result in someone having a very, very high fever. And Juan Diego does not leave his uncle's side until 2 days later. He feels terrible because on the one hand, he wants to obey the bishop and get a sign from Our Lady, but he does not want to leave his uncle unattended. So finally, realizing that his uncle may be close to death and wanting him to have the sacraments of the church, Juan Diego leaves, but does not go the same route he normally would near that path of Tepeyac, but rather goes a different place. And what happens? Our Lady once again appears to him. And she knows that his uncle is ill, and she knows that the bishop has asked for a sign. So she first encourages Juan Diego and says, be calm, be still, your uncle will live and will be just fine. And in that moment, Juan Diego's uncle is perfectly cured. She then goes on and says, the bishop is looking for a sign. So now, go up to the top of this mountain of Tepeyac. And now remember, this is early December, and it's very cold in this area. And she says, go up to the top of the mountain, and there you will find flowers. Bring some of those flowers to the bishop. Hide them in your tilma. The tilma is kind of like this outer cloak, similar to what you see priests wear at Mass, kind of this all-encompassing cloak. She said, gather up some of those flowers and hold them close to yourself, and do not let them be seen until you show them to the bishop. Juan Diego makes his way up to the very top of the mountain, and sure enough, even in the dead of winter, finds these most beautiful roses of all different shades. He gathers up a whole bunch into his tilma and carries them down with great joy and enthusiasm, and again goes to the bishop's residence. After some waiting, he's ushered in again, and he explains that Our Lady has once again appeared to him. And in his haste and joy, he goes to show the flowers, but they all drop from his tilma. He's embarrassed, he's shocked because he's dropped everything right in front of the bishop, and when he looks up, he sees the bishop has his jaw dropped to the ground, and he himself is kneeling down because what appears on the tilma, on the garment of Juan Diego, is this very image. This is one of many, many copies of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it is a true miracle of God. This image has been studied, the real one, the tilma itself, in Mexico City at the beautiful shrine that was eventually built in honor of Our Lady. It has been studied many, many times. And, noteworthy, it's been studied quite often by those who are not believers, either in the miracle of Guadalupe or who are not even Christians at all, who have their doubts. And yet every time this image has been scrutinized, it has been demonstrated to truly be a miracle. There are just a few points that I want to note with you because I find this image to be extraordinary. One of the things is that Our Lady appears as an Aztec princess. So an Aztec right there. This was someone that Juan Diego and all the people around him would have identified with because she was just like them. She looks like them. In fact, she even spoke the very specific dialect that Juan Diego spoke. That is, Mary appears to them like them. Just as when she appeared in other visions to other saints around the world, she appears like them. Why? Because she is the mother of all of us. Not just of one particular people or culture or language, but she is truly the mother of the world, the mother of the whole Church Universal spread around the globe. Also, you see along here, there's a kind of tassels that are hanging. That would have been an immediate sign to the people that this lady is pregnant. In the culture of the time, a woman would wear kind of a cord, almost like a belt around her waist. It was a sign that she was expecting a child. And how appropriately, only weeks before we celebrate the birth of Jesus, that Our Lady would appear pregnant. One of the very rare times a Marian apparition where she appears to be pregnant. We're also told that when you really focus in on the eyes of Our Lady, And scientists have done this, and you can probably even look for some videos of this on YouTube. There are many out there. The reflection in the eyes is actually an inversion of what Mary would have been seeing, and we can actually see a man kneeling before her. Undeniably, Juan Diego. There's also, on her great cloak here, there are all these stars. Now we think, okay, that's just lovely decoration. But it was in 1983 that two scientists, one of whom was a priest, studied carefully the arrangement of the stars, and were able to look back and look at the way the stars would have been arranged on December 9th, when Our Lady appeared. And sure enough, they are in the exact same constellation as they were that night over the Mexican sky. But it's not from the vantage point of us looking up at the sky. Rather, it is inverted, as if someone outside the universe is looking towards the earth. Many have concluded this was God's view of the earth on that most historic night when Our Lady appeared. The Aztec people also would have realized that Mary appears as a great warrior, but not a god. She is praying to someone greater than herself. So she herself is not God, but rather serves God. Her gown is also, on the fringe of it, mirrors the surrounding countryside that would have been typical in the Tepeyac area. In all of these ways, and in others, this image reminds us of the closeness of Our Lady to each of us. As a result of this encounter with Juan Diego, millions upon millions of Mexican people converted to Catholicism. And now today Mexico boasts over 85% of its population adhering to the Catholic faith. And they're all united in a special way to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Pope Pius XII in the 1940s declared Our Lady of Guadalupe the patroness of all the Americas, North America, Central America, and South America. She is a unifying figure for all of us, because at this time, as missionary activity was on the uptick and more people were becoming Christian, Mary stands as that reminder to us. As I mentioned in my last video, remember well that in the Gospel of St. John we hear that as Jesus was dying upon the cross, he entrusted to John, and vicariously the whole church, Mary as our mother, and told Mary that we were her children. Our Lady of Guadalupe stands as a great reminder to us as we make our way in this Advent pilgrimage towards Christmas, that God is with us. The role of Mary is always to point to her Son, to be praying an advocate before God for us. So, wherever we are right now in these days, in these darker days, in these hope-filled days of Advent, let's double down on our effort to incorporate Mary into this journey by praying the rosary, by asking her intercession, by going to her as we would our loving mother, knowing that she cares for us and that she's praying for us. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer for you, feel free to complete the Google Doc that's in the link below. A very blessed Advent to you all. And until I see you again, God bless you and your family.